My son preferred his wife's birthday to his mother's funeral, and now he came to me with a request. My name is Alma, and I just turned 68 last month. When you've lived as long as I have, you expect certain disappointments, but nothing prepared me for what my stepson Jeffrey did. He chose not to attend his own mother's funeral because it conflicted with his wife's birthday celebration. The pain was still fresh when he showed up at my door the very next day with a request that left me speechless. What happened next changed everything between us. If you're watching this while drinking your morning coffee or late night tea, drop a comment letting me know what time it is where you are. Hit like and subscribe so we can connect through more life stories that remind us family isn't just about blood. I met William 22 years ago at a community fundraiser for the local library. We were both in our late 40s then, both divorced, and neither of us looking for love. I was arranging book displays when he approached me with a donation check and the warmest smile I'd seen in years. 3 months of coffee dates later, we were inseparable. William had one son, Jeffrey, who was 25 when we married. I never tried to replace his mother, Margaret. That wasn't my place. Instead, I hoped to build something new, a friendship based on mutual respect. The first few years were promising. Jeffrey would join us for Sunday dinners, sometimes bringing his college girlfriend. He called me Alma, never Mom, or Stepmom, which was perfectly fine with me. "Dad seems happy with you," he told me once while helping wash dishes after dinner. "That's all that matters to me." Those words meant the world to me. I kept them close during the more difficult times that would follow. William and I had 17 beautiful years together before cancer took him from us 5 years ago. He fought hard through 3 rounds of chemo, and I was there holding his hand when he finally let go. His last coherent words to me were about Jeffrey. "Promise me you'll still be there for him," William had whispered. "He acts tough, but he needs family." I promised, of course. How could I not? William was the love of my life, and Jeffrey was the only child I would ever have, even if not by birth. After William passed, I maintained contact with Jeffrey. By then, he was married to Natalie, a marketing executive with perfect hair and a personality that filled any room she entered. I noticed early on how she would speak over Jeffrey or make decisions without consulting him. At family gatherings, she would check his plate, adding vegetables or removing bread with little comments like, "Remember your cholesterol, honey." Jeffrey never seemed to mind. In fact, he appeared grateful for her attention. "Natalie knows what's best," he would say with an accommodating smile. "She's always looking out for me." Their wedding had been lavish. Natalie's parents spared no expense. William was still with us then, though already sick. He gave a beautiful toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "To my son," he had said, raising his glass of water since alcohol wasn't permitted with his medication. "May your marriage be as blessed as mine." Jeffrey and Natalie now have 2 children, Lucas, who's 8, and Sophia, who just turned 6. They're wonderful kids with William's gentle eyes. I don't get to see them as often as I'd like, but I send birthday gifts and Christmas presents. Last year, I knitted matching sweaters with their initials. Natalie sent a polite thank you text with a photo of the kids wearing them, though I suspect those sweaters were quickly replaced with whatever designer brands she preferred. I still live in the 2-story colonial William and I shared in Mapleton. It's too big for just me, but I can't bear to leave the garden he planted or the kitchen where we danced while making Sunday breakfast. The house holds memories in every corner. His reading chair by the bay window, the slightly crooked shelf he installed in the guest bathroom, the mark on the wall where we measured Jeffrey's height when he briefly moved in with us after college. The neighborhood has changed over the years. Younger families have moved in bringing noise and life. The Hendersons next door invite me to their summer barbecues, and their teenage son mows my lawn. I've found comfort in these small kindnesses as I've adjusted to life without William. Jeffrey and his family live across town in a newer development with manicured lawns and community pools. Their house is modern and minimalist. Natalie's taste, not Jeffrey's. I remember how he used to love his father's collection of vintage baseball memorabilia and old hardcover books. There's nothing like that in their home now. Everything is white, gray, or black with clean lines and abstract art on the walls. "It's easier to keep clean with the kids," Natalie explained during one of my rare visits, though I noticed how she followed the children around with antibacterial wipes and coasters. Despite our differences, I tried to maintain a good relationship with Natalie for Jeffrey's sake. I brought homemade casseroles when Sophia was born. I remembered Natalie's birthday with thoughtful gifts, a silk scarf one year, a spa certificate another. I never criticized or interfered, knowing how delicate in-law relationships can be. William had taught me that sometimes keeping peace means keeping certain thoughts to yourself, but maintaining that peace became increasingly difficult as the years passed. Invitations to family events grew less frequent. When I did visit, conversations felt strained. Natalie would check her watch or phone repeatedly, signaling that my time had an expiration date. Jeffrey, once warm and engaging, became quiet in her presence, looking to her before answering even simple questions about his work or the children's activities. Still, I persisted, for William's sake, for the promise I made, for the love I genuinely felt for the family we had created together, however imperfect it might be. Margaret and I were never close. How could we be? I was the woman who married her ex-husband. Though their divorce had occurred years before William and I met, there was an unspoken tension whenever we encountered each other at Jeffrey's graduation or at community events in our small town. Margaret was tall and elegant, with the kind of posture that came from old money and good breeding. She lived in the historic district in a house that had been in her family for generations. After the divorce, she had returned to using her maiden name Lancaster, which carried weight in local circles. She was active in the garden club and historical society positions that kept her visible and respected despite the scandal of her divorce. William rarely spoke about their marriage or what had caused its end. "The past is past," he would say whenever I asked. We both moved on, but from snippets of conversation and things Jeffrey let slip over the years, I gathered it had been Margaret who left seeking something William couldn't provide. When I heard that Margaret had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, my heart genuinely ached for her, and especially for Jeffrey. No matter our differences, she was his mother, the woman who had raised him, taught him to read, and shaped his early years. No one deserves the suffering that comes with such a diagnosis. I sent a tasteful arrangement of flowers to her home with a card expressing my sympathies. It was the right thing to do. William would have wanted that. 3 weeks later, Jeffrey called to tell me that the doctors had given Margaret only days to live. His voice sounded hollow, distant. I offered immediately to help with arrangements to be present in whatever way he needed. "Thanks, Alma," he said, his voice catching. "I'll let you know." The next call came 4 days later. Margaret had passed peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday. "Will you be there?" I asked, already mentally rearranging my schedule to support him through this difficult time. There was a long pause on the line. "Actually, I can't make it," Jeffrey said, his voice tight. "What do you mean you can't make it, Jeffrey? This is your mother's funeral." I know. But it's Natalie's birthday, and we've had this party planned for months. 50 guests, catering, deposit the works. She would kill me if I asked to reschedule." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Jeffrey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this isn't a dentist appointment you can reschedule. This is your final goodbye to your mother." "You don't understand, Alma. Natalie's turning 40. It's a milestone. Her college friends are flying in from all over the country." "And your mother only dies once," I countered, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Can't Natalie see this is an exceptional circumstance?" "We discussed it," he said, though his tone suggested the discussion had been brief and one-sided. "She feels that death shouldn't take priority over celebrating life. And honestly, Mom and I weren't that close these last few years." I closed my eyes, counted to 10 in my head. "What about the children? Don't you think they should be there to say goodbye to their grandmother?" "Natalie doesn't think funerals are appropriate for kids their age, too morbid." Each excuse felt like a slap. I thought of William, how disappointed he would be in his son's choices, but I also remembered my promise to him, to be there for Jeffrey. So instead of hanging up in disgust, I took a deep breath. "I understand." I lied. "I'll represent the family. Is there anything specific you'd like me to do or say?" There was relief in his voice when he answered. "Thanks, Alma. You're the best. Maybe you could bring one of those picture boards with photos of Mom through the years." I agreed, though my heart was heavy. After hanging up, I cried for nearly an hour. For Margaret, for Jeffrey, for William, who wasn't here to guide his son through this moral failure. The funeral was exactly as difficult as I had imagined. The Lancaster family plot was situated under an ancient oak tree in the oldest section of Mapleton Cemetery. About 60 people gathered there on that unseasonably warm Saturday morning. Margaret's cousins, her friends from the garden club, former colleagues from her days teaching at the private academy. I felt their curious glances, heard their whispered questions. Where was Jeffrey? How could the only son miss his mother's funeral? I manufactured an excuse about an unavoidable work emergency, the lie bitter on my tongue. Some nodded in understanding. Others pursed their lips in obvious disapproval. The memorial display I created stood on an easel near the casket. Photos of Margaret as a bright-eyed child, as a serious college student, as a young mother holding baby Jeffrey. I had found the pictures in albums William had kept in our attic. In one, Margaret and William stood proudly behind a 10-year-old Jeffrey who clutched a science fair ribbon. They looked happy then, a family unit still whole. Margaret's older sister Judith gave the eulogy, her voice breaking, as she described Margaret's passion for education and community service. Several garden club members shared stories of her generosity and wit. When it came time for family to speak, all eyes turned expectantly toward me. As the stand-in for the absent son, I felt obligated to say something. I approached the podium, heart hammering. Margaret loved beauty in all its forms, I said, choosing my words carefully. In flowers, in literature, in the historic buildings she fought to preserve. But her greatest creation was her son Jeffrey, who carries her intelligence and strength into the next generation. Though circumstances prevented him from being here today, I know he holds deep gratitude for the life and love his mother gave him. The words felt hollow, even as I spoke them. Around me, faces reflected varying degrees of skepticism and pity. They knew, as I did, that no circumstance justified a son's absence from this solemn occasion. After the service, I stood in the receiving line beside Judith, accepting condolences meant for Jeffrey. Each handshake, each embrace felt unearned fraudulent. I was not Margaret's daughter. I had no right to stand in her son's place. Yet here I was, performing the duty he had abandoned. The reception was held at Margaret's home, catered by the women of her church. I helped serve coffee and arrange flowers in vases, keeping busy to avoid conversation. Still, I couldn't escape Judith's piercing gaze as she cornered me in the kitchen. William would be ashamed, she said without preamble. That boy choosing a birthday party over his own mother's funeral. I flinched at her directness, but couldn't disagree. Jeffrey makes his own choices, I said quietly. I can't control him. No, she agreed, her eyes softening slightly. But you're here, doing what needs to be done. Margaret never had a kind word for you, you know. She resented you taking her place. I never took her place, I protested. No, you didn't. You created your own. She patted my arm awkwardly before moving away to greet new arrivals. That night, alone in the house that felt emptier than usual, I sat in William's reading chair and allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's emotions. Grief for a woman I barely knew. Disappointment in the man Jeffrey had become. Anger at Natalie's selfishness. And beneath it all, a deep, aching loneliness for William, who would have known what to do, what to say, how to make this right. I tried, Will, I whispered to the empty room. I really tried. The doorbell rang at precisely 10:30 the next morning. I was still in my robe, nursing my second cup of coffee and sorting through the sympathy cards I would need to respond to on Margaret's behalf. Through the frosted glass panel, I could make out Jeffrey's familiar silhouette. My first feeling was relief. Perhaps he had reconsidered, felt remorse for missing the funeral. I opened the door to find him smartly dressed in khakis and a navy blazer, looking refreshed and well-rested. Nothing in his appearance suggested he had spent any time grieving. Jeffrey, I said, suddenly conscious of my rumpled appearance. This is a surprise. Morning, Alma, he replied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Got a minute to talk? I gestured toward the kitchen where my coffee waited. Of course. Would you like some coffee? Or I could make tea. Coffee's fine, he said, following me down the hallway. He glanced at the sympathy cards spread across the table, but didn't mention them. How are you doing? The question caught me off guard. Was he asking how I was coping with his mother's funeral? With the deception I'd maintained on his behalf, with the judgment of the community. I'm managing, I said carefully, pouring him coffee into William's old Northwestern mug. It was a lovely service. Many people came to pay their respects. Jeffrey nodded absently, adding 2 sugars to his coffee, a habit from childhood that Natalie hadn't managed to break. That's good. I'm sure Mom would have appreciated that. I waited for him to ask about details, who had attended, what was said, how his mother had looked in her final rest. But instead he sipped his coffee and glanced around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. "This house has good bones," he remarked. "They don't build them like this anymore." "No, they don't," I agreed, puzzled by the change in subject. Jeffrey set down his mug and leaned forward, his expression suddenly earnest. "Alma, I need to ask a favor. A big one." And there it was. Not condolences or regrets, but a request. I should have known. I kept my face neutral as I waited for him to continue. "Natalie and I have been looking at houses in Lakeside Estates. You know that new development by the country club? We found the perfect place. 4 bedrooms, home office, gourmet kitchen with all the upgrades. The kids would each have their own rooms, plus there's a bonus room we could use as a playroom." I nodded, wondering where this was heading. "The thing is," Jeffrey continued, his words coming faster now, "the market's hot right now. Houses in that neighborhood are going for 20-30,000 over asking price. We need to move quickly if we want this one." "I see," I said, though I didn't, not really. "And how can I help with that?" Jeffrey took a deep breath. "We're short on the down payment, about 50,000 short. I was hoping you might consider lending us the money. Just temporarily, of course. I'd pay you back as soon as my year-end bonus comes through." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. This was why he had come, not to explain his absence at the funeral or to ask about his mother's final moments, but to ask for money. "Jeffrey," I said slowly, "your mother was just laid to rest yesterday, a funeral you didn't attend because of your wife's birthday party, and now you're here asking me for $50,000. A flush crept up his neck. "I know the timing isn't great, but this house won't wait. There are already other offers coming in." "There will be other houses?" I pointed out. "Not like this one. It's in the best school district. The neighborhood has a waiting list just to get on the waiting list. Lucas and Sophia deserve the best education, don't they? You always said how important that was." There it was. The manipulation, using the children as leverage. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my voice level. "Your father and I saved for decades, Jeffrey. We lived within our means. The money I have now needs to last me the rest of my life. I don't have a pension like your father did." I know, he said quickly. "And I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, but this is for family Alma. For the kids." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, then back at me apologetically. "It's Natalie. She wants to know how it's going." Of course she did. I doubted this house hunt was Jeffrey's idea at all. Natalie had always been status conscious, always looking for ways to climb the social ladder in our small community. "Tell her it's going fine," I said, buying time to gather my thoughts. "We're just catching up." Jeffrey typed a quick response, then returned his attention to me. "So what do you think? Can you help us out? It would mean the world to us. To the kids, especially." I looked at this man across from me, William's son, but in that moment a stranger. The boy who had helped wash dishes and talked about his father's happiness was gone, replaced by someone who prioritized status and material things over family duty and respect. "I need some time to think about it," I said finally. "This isn't a small amount we're talking about." Relief flooded his face. He clearly interpreted my non-refusal as eventual agreement. "Of course, take all the time you need. Well, by Friday would be ideal. That's when we need to submit our offer." His phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. "I should take this," he said, already standing. "Thanks for the coffee, Alma. And for yesterday, handling everything." He was out the door before I could respond, already deep in conversation with Natalie, his voice dropping to a whisper as he assured her that yes, he had asked, and no, I hadn't said no. I remained at the kitchen table staring at William's mug half full of cooling coffee, feeling a hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with Margaret's passing and everything to do with the son we had raised. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying Jeffrey's visit over and over. The casual way he had dismissed his mother's funeral, the entitlement in his voice when he asked for money, the manipulation using his children, my step-grandchildren, as emotional leverage. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely. I pulled on my robe and went downstairs to the living room where photographs of our blended family lined the mantelpiece. William and me, on our wedding day, Jeffrey's college graduation, the children's baptisms, moments that had felt meaningful at the time, but now seemed like performances rather than genuine connections. I picked up my favorite photo, William teaching 5-year-old Sophia to fish at the lake house we used to rent each summer, his patient smile, her determined little face. It was taken just weeks before his final diagnosis. "What would you do, Will?" I whispered to the image. "What would you tell your son if you were here?" In the stillness of the early morning, I could almost hear his voice. William had always been the family peacemaker, the one who found the path of least resistance. But he had also been a man of principle, someone who believed that character mattered more than comfort. "The right thing is rarely the easy thing," he used to say when faced with difficult decisions. I set the photo down and moved to William's desk in the corner of the living room. The small key to the bottom drawer was hidden behind a loose section of baseboard just as he had shown me years ago. Inside the drawer was a leather-bound journal, William's private thoughts during his illness, which I had never had the heart to read until now. Opening it felt like an invasion, but also like seeking guidance from the only person whose opinion truly mattered in the situation. The journal was filled with William's neat handwriting entries dating back to his first diagnosis. I flipped through until I found entries about Jeffrey. There were many, each reflecting William's deep love for his only child, but also his concerns. "Spoke with Jeff today about his future plans." One entry read, "Worried he's letting Natalie make all the decisions. He's always been eager to please, but he needs to find his own voice. A man who can't stand up for himself will eventually fall for anything." Another entry dated just weeks before his death. "Jeff and Natalie brought the kids today. Such a joy to see them, though the visit was brief. Natalie seemed impatient, checking her watch throughout. I wonder if Jeff notices how she isolates him from family. I should say something, but don't want to spend my final weeks in conflict. Have to trust that the values I've tried to instill will eventually resurface." Tears blurred my vision as I read William's hopes and fears for the son he wouldn't live to guide into true manhood. The son who was now at my door, asking for money while neglecting the deeper values his father had tried to impart. As dawn broke, I called my closest friend Denise. A widow herself, she had navigated family conflicts with her own stepchildren after her husband's passing. If anyone could offer perspective, it would be her. $50,000, she repeated after I explained the situation. "And he didn't even go to his own mother's funeral, girl. You know what I'm going to say." "Say it anyway." I sighed, cradling the phone against my shoulder as I made a fresh pot of coffee. "You give that boy money, now you're telling him it's okay to treat you, to treat family, like an ATM machine. No respect required, just insert card and withdraw." "But I promised William I'd look after him," I protested. "Looking after someone doesn't mean enabling their worst behavior. William would want his son to be a man of character, not a puppet on his wife's string." She was right, of course. The William I knew would be heartbroken to see what his son had become. Someone who valued appearances over substance, who would miss his mother's funeral for a birthday party. "So what do I do?" I asked. "Just say no and damage the relationship further." "The relationship is already damaged, honey. Not by you, but by Jeffrey's choices. The question is, do you want a relationship based on financial transactions or one based on mutual respect and genuine care?" After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my cooling coffee, mulling over Denise's words. The truth was, saying yes to Jeffrey's request wouldn't repair our relationship. It would simply establish a precedent that I was there to provide financial support, regardless of how he treated me or the memory of his parents. That wasn't the legacy William would want me to uphold. Slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. Not a rejection exactly, but a different kind of gift. A last step toward either healing our fractured family or acknowledging that some bridges cannot be rebuilt. I spent the rest of the day gathering items from the attic, from William's desk, from my own cherished collections. By evening, I was ready. I called Jeffrey. "I've been thinking about your request," I told him. "Could you come by tomorrow evening? Around 6, just you, not Natalie or the kids." "Is everything okay?" he asked, sounding concerned. "Everything's fine. I just want to talk to you privately before making any decisions." There was a brief pause. "Natalie won't like being excluded." "This isn't about Natalie," I said firmly. "It's about you and me and your father's legacy." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay," he finally agreed. 6 o'clock. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would know I had done my best to honor not just the letter of my promise to William, but its spirit as well. I spent the entire next day cooking Jeffrey's favorite foods from childhood: pot roast with carrots and potatoes, homemade rolls, and apple pie with cinnamon ice cream. The familiar motions of chopping, stirring, and kneading were therapeutic, giving my hands purpose, while my mind continued to process what I would say when he arrived. The house filled with comforting aromas that triggered memories of Sunday dinners when William was alive. How many meals had we shared around that old oak table? How many conversations about hopes and dreams and everyday troubles? Food had always been my love language, the way I showed care when words felt insufficient. Jeffrey arrived precisely at 6, looking slightly uncomfortable in casual clothes, jeans and a sweater rather than yesterday's business attire. He brought a bottle of wine, a peace offering perhaps, or an attempt to soften me up. "Something smells amazing," he said as he stepped inside, handing me the wine. It was a decent Cabernet, one of William's favorites. I wondered if he remembered that or if it was coincidence. "Your father's pot roast recipe," I replied, taking the wine to the kitchen. "I thought we could have dinner while we talk." Jeffrey followed me, his eyes widening at the spread laid out on the counter. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "It's no trouble to cook for family," I said simply. "Would you mind setting the table? The plates are in the same cabinet they've always been." He moved automatically to the right cabinet, his body remembering what his mind might have forgotten. The familiar routine seemed to relax him. For a moment, he was the Jeffrey of old, the young man who had welcomed me into his life before Natalie had reshuffled his priorities. We worked in companionable silence, him setting the table, while I put the finishing touches on dinner. It felt good, this simple domestic harmony, a glimpse of what might have been if different choices had been made. Once we were seated with full plates before us, Jeffrey raised his wine glass. "To good food and family," he offered. I clinked my glass against his. "And to memories," I added. "The ones that shape us, and the ones we choose to honor." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face at my words, but he nodded and took a sip. The meal proceeded with safe, neutral conversation. Lucas's soccer accomplishments, Sophia's talent for drawing the unseasonably warm weather we'd been having. It wasn't until we were halfway through our apple pie that I steered the conversation toward the real purpose of our dinner. "I've been thinking about your request," I began carefully, "about the money for the house in Lakeside Estates." Jeffrey set down his fork, his attention suddenly laser-focused. "Yes. Before I give you my answer, I want to share something with you." I rose from the table and went to the living room, returning with a wooden box about the size of a large book. It was William's old cigar box, repurposed years ago to hold special mementos. I had spent hours the previous day selecting its contents with great care. I placed it on the table between us. "This belonged to your father." Jeffrey looked at the box with curiosity. "I remember this. Dad used to keep baseball cards in it." "Among other things," I agreed. "Open it." He hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside were carefully arranged items: William's pocket watch, a baseball signed by Jeffrey's childhood hero, the playbill from the first Broadway show William and I had attended together, a small velvet box containing William's wedding ring, and beneath it all his leather journal. Jeffrey picked up the items one by one, his expression softening with each memory he encountered. When he came to the journal, he looked up questioningly. "I've never read this," he said. "Neither had I until recently," I admitted. "Your father was a private man in many ways, but I think he would want you to read it now." Jeffrey set the journal aside for the moment, continuing to explore the contents of the box. At the very bottom was an envelope with his name written in William's handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before William's death and a small key. "What's this?" Jeffrey asked, holding up the key. "It's to the safe deposit box at First National," I explained. "Your father left something there for you. I've known about it, but was instructed to wait for the right time." Jeffrey unfolded the letter and began to read silently. I watched as various emotions played across his face: surprise, sadness, something like shame. When he finished, he carefully refolded it. "Dad knew he wouldn't see the kids grow up," he said, his voice thick. "He set aside money for their education, 25,000 for each of them." I nodded. He wanted to make sure their futures were secure, regardless of what happened. "And he knew," Jeffrey swallowed hard, He knew I might be tempted to use it for other things. That's why he put you in charge of when I would learn about it. Your father knew you very well, I said gently, both your strengths and your areas for growth. Jeffrey stared at the key in his palm. So this is your answer about the loan for the house? Part of it, I replied. The money your father set aside is for Lucas and Sophia's education, not for a bigger house or a more prestigious address. That was his wish, and I intend to honor it. I could see disappointment settling into the lines around his mouth. He had come expecting $50,000 and was instead receiving a lesson in priorities. As for my own answer, I continued, it's in that journal. Your father wrote about the kind of man he hoped you would become, about the values he tried to instill in you, about his fears that you were allowing others to make your important life decisions. You mean Natalie, Jeffrey said flatly. I mean anyone who would lead you away from the things that truly matter, I corrected. Your father believed that a home is made of people and principles, not square footage and zip codes. So that's a no on the loan, he concluded, his voice hardening. That's a no on the loan, I confirmed, but it's a yes to helping you reconnect with the values your father hoped to pass on to you. It's a yes to supporting you in becoming the man he knew you could be, someone who shows up for family obligations even when they're difficult or inconvenient, someone who makes his own decisions based on character rather than convenience. Jeffrey pushed back his chair, anger flashing in his eyes. You have no right to judge me. You're not even my real mother. The words were meant to wound, and they did, but I kept my composure. No, I'm not. Your real mother was buried 3 days ago, and you weren't there to say goodbye. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. That was a difficult decision? No, Jeffrey, it wasn't. It was actually very simple. You chose what was easy over what was right, and now you're asking me to fund that same pattern of choices. He stood abruptly. I don't need to listen to this. Natalie was right about you. You've always been jealous of her influence over me. I remained seated, keeping my voice steady. I'm not jealous, Jeffrey. I'm concerned. For you, for the children, even for Natalie. A family built on appearances rather than authenticity will eventually crumble. We're done here, he declared, heading for the door. Keep your money and your lectures. Take the box, I called after him. It belongs to you. So does everything in it, including the truth your father wanted you to hear. He hesitated at the door, then turned back and snatched the wooden box from the table, leaving the journal behind either by accident or design. Goodbye, Alma, he said coldly. I won't bother you again. As the door slammed behind him, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and relief. The bridge might be burning, but at least I had taken my stand on the right side of the river. Whatever happened next would be up to Jeffrey. I carefully packed away the leftovers from our dinner, wrapped William's journal in a soft cloth, and returned to the living room to sit in my husband's favorite chair. The house felt emptier than ever, but my conscience was at peace. I did my best, Will, I whispered into the silence. The rest is in his hands now. 2 weeks of silence followed Jeffrey's angry departure. No calls, no texts, not even a message delivered through Lucas or Sophia. It was the longest we had gone without communication since William's death. I tried to fill my days with routine, volunteering at the library, tending William's garden, meeting Denise for our weekly lunch dates. But the rift with Jeffrey hung heavy on my heart. Had I been too harsh, too judgmental? I reviewed our conversation countless times, wondering if I could have found a gentler way to deliver the same message. On the 15th day of silence, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Grandma Alma, a small voice said. Lucas. Lucas, honey, how are you? My heart leapt at hearing his voice. I'm okay, he said, though he didn't sound okay. I borrowed Mom's old phone to call you. She doesn't know. Alarm bells rang in my head. Is everything all right, sweetheart? Dad and Mom were fighting really loud last night about money and some house we're not getting now. Dad said some bad words and slammed the door. He didn't come home until really late. My chest tightened. I'm sorry you had to hear that, Lucas. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things. Mom said it was your fault. He continued, his voice small. She said you're just a step-grandmother, and you don't really care about us. The cruelty of saying such things within earshot of the children took my breath away. Lucas, that's not true at all. I love you and Sophia very much. You're my family. That's what I thought, he said, sounding relieved. Dad has been really sad. He sits in the garage looking at old stuff in a wooden box. I think he misses you. Before I could respond, I heard a commotion in the background, Natalie's voice demanding to know who Lucas was talking to. The call ended abruptly. I sat for a long time with the phone in my hand, weighing my options. The easiest path would be to wait for Jeffrey to make the next move. But easy wasn't always right, as I had reminded him, and there were children caught in the middle of this adult conflict. The next morning, I baked Jeffrey's favorite coffee cake and packed a bag with books I had bought for the children. Then I drove across town to the modern development where their house stood gleaming white against carefully manicured landscaping. I hadn't been invited, but family sometimes requires bold moves. I parked in their driveway and carried my peace offerings to the door, heart pounding, as I rang the bell. Natalie answered, her perfectly highlighted hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her expression freezing when she saw me. Alma, this is unexpected. Hello, Natalie. I brought coffee cake and some books for the children. May I come in? She hesitated, clearly weighing the social awkwardness of turning me away against her desire to do exactly that. The children are doing homework, she said finally, but I suppose you can come in for a few minutes. The house was spotless, as always, decorated in the latest style from home design magazines: gray walls, white furniture, abstract art, and carefully coordinated colors. Nothing personal, nothing lived in. No signs of the argument Lucas had described. Is Jeffrey home? I asked, setting my offerings on the kitchen counter. He's in the garage, Natalie replied stiffly, working on some project. I nodded. Would it be all right if I said hello to Lucas and Sophia first? Again, that hesitation, then a curt nod. They're upstairs. First door on the right. 10 minutes, please. As I said, they have homework. I climbed the stairs, noting how quiet the house was for one containing 2 young children. The door to their shared study room was ajar. Lucas sat at a small desk, pencil in hand, while Sophia lay on her stomach on the carpet coloring. Grandma Alma. Sophia spotted me first, leaping up to throw her arms around my waist. Lucas followed more cautiously, glancing toward the stairs, as if expecting his mother to appear. It's okay, I assured him. Your mom knows I'm here. Relief washed over his face as he joined his sister in hugging me. Did you bring books? He asked, spotting the bag in my hand. I did. The new diary of a wimpy kid for you and a book about a girl detective for Sophia. They accepted the gifts with genuine enthusiasm, Sophia immediately opening hers to show me the illustrations. Lucas hung back, clearly wanting to say something. I'm sorry about the phone call, he whispered when Sophia was distracted. Mom was really mad. You don't need to apologize, I told him, smoothing his hair. I'm glad you called. I've missed you both. Dad misses you too, Lucas confided. I heard him tell Mom that you were right about something and she got really upset. Before I could ask what I was right about, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Natalie appeared in the doorway. Children, back to your homework now. Sophia, put the book away until you finished your math sheet. Her tone was pleasant but firm, leaving no room for negotiation. The children immediately returned to their assigned tasks, the brief moment of spontaneous joy extinguished. Jeffrey's coming in from the garage, Natalie informed me. He'll meet you in the living room. I followed her downstairs, feeling like a guest being managed, rather than family being welcomed. In the living room, Natalie positioned herself on the sofa, gesturing for me to take the chair opposite, the one farthest from the hallway that led to the garage. When Jeffrey appeared, I was shocked by his appearance. In just 2 weeks, he seemed to have aged years. His face was drawn with dark circles under his eyes. His casual weekend clothes looked rumpled as if he'd slept in them. Alma, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. What are you doing here? Before I could answer, Natalie interjected. She brought coffee cake and books for the children. Wasn't that thoughtful? Her tone made thoughtful sound like manipulative. I ignored the barb. I thought it was time we talked, I said, addressing Jeffrey directly. Family shouldn't go this long without speaking. He glanced at Natalie, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, but something in Jeffrey seemed to straighten to firm. You're right, he said, moving to sit in the chair next to mine rather than beside Natalie on the sofa. We should talk. I'm sure you two have a lot to catch up on, Natalie said, rising smoothly. I'll check on the children while you chat." Once she was gone, Jeffrey exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry about how I left things," he began. "I was angry and embarrassed." "I understand," I said. "It wasn't an easy conversation for either of us." He rubbed his face tiredly. "We didn't get the house. Another couple outbid us even with a smaller down payment. Natalie was disappointed. I'm sorry if that's caused tension between you." Jeffrey gave a hollow laugh. "The house was just the latest thing. There's always something we need that's just out of reach. A better car, a vacation to the right destination, the perfect Christmas gifts for the kids." I nodded, recognizing the pattern. It's easy to get caught in that cycle of always wanting more. "I read Dad's journal," he admitted quietly. "After I stormed out, I realized I'd left it behind. I went back for it the next day while you were at your volunteer shift." This was news to me. "You did? Mrs. Patterson next door let me in with the spare key you keep with her. I hope that was okay." "Of course," I assured him. "The journal belongs to you anyway?" Jeffrey leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Dad saw what was happening with me and Natalie long before I did. He wrote about how he watched me disappear a little more each year into her plans, her ambitions." "Your father was very perceptive," I said carefully. "He wrote about Mom's funeral too, not directly since he died before she did, but he wrote about how he hoped I would honor both of you when the time came." Jeffrey's voice caught. "He would have been so disappointed in me, Alma." "He would have understood that we all make mistakes," I corrected gently. "What matters is how we respond once we recognize them." As we talked, I noticed movement in the hallway. Jeffrey's back was to the door, but I could see Natalie standing just out of his view listening. When she realized I had spotted her, she retreated silently. "I don't know what to do," Jeffrey confessed. "I love Natalie, but lately I've been wondering if she loves the idea of what we could be more than who we actually are." Before I could respond, a small voice piped up from the staircase. "Daddy, can we have some of Grandma's cake now?" We both turned to see Sophia, standing on the bottom step, her brother hovering behind her. Their homework had apparently been completed in record time. Jeffrey smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in ages. "Let's ask Grandma if it's okay to cut into her cake." "Of course it is," I laughed. "That's why I brought it." As the children raced to the kitchen, Jeffrey hung back to walk beside me. "Thank you for coming today," he said quietly. "For not giving up on us." "That's what family does," I replied simply. "We show up even when it's difficult, especially then." In the kitchen, I helped cut generous slices of coffee cake while Jeffrey poured milk for the children. Natalie appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable as she watched this domestic scene unfold without her orchestration. "Would you like some cake, Natalie?" I offered, extending an olive branch. "No, thank you," she declined. "I don't eat refined sugar." The children exchanged glances, but said nothing, clearly accustomed to their mother's dietary restrictions. As we sat around the kitchen island, enjoying the treat, I noticed Jeffrey watching his wife with new eyes, as if seeing patterns he had previously been blind to. When Lucas accidentally spilled a few crumbs and Natalie immediately reached for the handheld vacuum, Jeffrey gently intercepted her. "It's just a few crumbs, Nat. Let the kids enjoy their cake." A flash of annoyance crossed her face, quickly masked. "I just don't want ants." "We've never had ants," he pointed out mildly. "And if we did, we'd handle it." It was a small moment of assertion barely noticeable to an outsider, but I recognized it for what it was, the first step toward reclaiming his voice in his own home. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed the wooden box on a shelf in the entryway, partially hidden behind a decorative vase. Jeffrey followed my gaze. "I've been going through Dad's things," he said, "remembering who he was, who he wanted me to be." I squeezed his arm. "He would be proud of you for trying. That's all any parent can ask." In the driveway, as I was getting into my car, Jeffrey approached alone. "I never apologized properly," he said, "for missing Mom's funeral. It was wrong, and I know that now." "Yes, it was," I agreed, not softening the truth. "But apologies mean more when they're followed by changed behavior." He nodded solemnly. "I'm starting therapy next week, and I've asked Natalie to consider couples counseling. She's thinking about it." That's a good start, I encouraged. Relationships take work, especially the ones worth saving. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror to see Jeffrey still standing in the driveway watching me go. There was a straightness to his posture that hadn't been there when I arrived, as if some invisible burden had been, at least partially, lifted. A month passed then, too. Spring blossomed into early summer. My relationship with Jeffrey began to heal through small, consistent efforts on both our parts. He called weekly sometimes just to check in, other times to ask for advice or share stories about the children. He came alone for dinner every other Sunday, a new tradition we established to maintain our connection. Natalie remained distant but civil, no longer actively preventing Jeffrey from spending time with me. The couple had indeed started counseling, according to Jeffrey, though he didn't share details out of respect for the process. On a warm evening in late June, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Jeffrey on my porch, looking nervous but determined. "Do you have time for a talk?" he asked. "Of course," I replied, ushering him inside. "Is everything okay?" "Yes and no," he said cryptically, following me to the living room. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation, about Dad, about priorities, about the kind of man and father I want to be." I settled into my usual chair, giving him space to continue. "I missed Mom's funeral because I was afraid to stand up to Natalie," he admitted. "It was her birthday, yes, but we could have moved the party. She wouldn't hear of it, and I took the path of least resistance." "That must be a difficult thing to acknowledge," I said. "It is, but it's also freeing in a way. Once I admitted that to myself, I started seeing all the other times I'd done the same thing, put Natalie's preferences above everything else, including my own values." He paced as he spoke, energy radiating from him. "The therapist calls it conflict avoidance. Dad called it letting others steer my ship. And what do you call it?" He stopped pacing, looking me directly in the eyes. "Cowardice. And I'm done with it." There was such conviction in his voice that I felt a surge of pride. This was William's son finding his strength at last. "What changed?" I asked. Jeffrey sat on the sofa, leaning forward earnestly. "The journal was part of it. Dad's words hit hard. But honestly, Alma, it was you taking that final step, refusing to enable my behavior, holding me accountable while still showing love. That's what real family does." I was touched by his insight. It wasn't an easy step to take. "I know, and I'm grateful for it." He took a deep breath. "I've made some decisions. Natalie and I are selling the house." "What?" This was unexpected. "Why?" "We don't need that much space. What we need is financial breathing room and time together as a family that isn't spent working to pay for things we don't need to impress people we don't even like." I couldn't hide my surprise. This was a dramatic shift from the man who had asked me for $50,000 to buy a larger house just months ago. Natalie agreed to this. A shadow crossed Jeffrey's face. "Not initially. We had some pretty intense arguments, but eventually she saw that something had to change. We were both miserable, the kids were feeling the tension. The turning point was when Lucas asked why we were always fighting about money when his friend Jack's family seems happy in a much smaller house." "Out of the mouths of babes," I murmured. "Exactly. We found a modest 3-bedroom not far from here, actually. The commute will be shorter for both of us, and we'll be able to build up our savings instead of being house poor." "I'm proud of you, Jeffrey," I said sincerely. "These kinds of changes take courage." "There's more," he continued. "I took the kids to visit Mom's grave. We brought flowers, and I told them stories about her, the good and the not so good, how she could be difficult, but also how she taught me to stand up for myself." He smiled ruefully, a lesson I apparently needed to relearn. Tears pricked my eyes. Margaret would have appreciated that gesture, I thought. "And," Jeffrey went on, "I want to apologize properly for missing her funeral. Not just with words, but with actions. I was thinking we could plan a small memorial gathering on her birthday next month. Nothing elaborate, just family and close friends remembering her." "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, deeply moved. "Your father would be so proud of the man you're becoming." "I hope so," Jeffrey replied quietly. "I miss him every day." "Me too." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in memories of William. There's one more thing, Jeffrey said finally. I want to start a college fund for the kids with Dad's money, but I'd like you to help me manage it, make sure it stays earmarked for education like he wanted. I'd be honored, I told him. As Jeffrey prepared to leave, he embraced me tightly. Thank you for taking that last step, Alma. For being strong enough to say no when saying yes would have been easier. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, I said. Your father taught me that. I watched from the porch as he drove away, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since William's passing. The promise I'd made to my husband had been kept, though not in the way either of us might have expected. I hadn't protected Jeffrey from consequences or difficulty. Instead, I had helped him find the strength to face them. In the months that followed, our family slowly rebuilt itself on a foundation of honesty and respect rather than obligation and appearances. Natalie remained Natalie, status conscious and controlling by nature, but she too seemed to be making efforts to change, perhaps recognizing what was truly at stake. The memorial gathering for Margaret was simple but meaningful. Jeffrey spoke eloquently about forgiveness and second chances. Afterward, he placed flowers on her grave with his children beside him, closing a circle that had been left painfully open. As for me, I learned that the final step in loving someone isn't always giving them what they ask for. Sometimes it's standing firm in what you know they need, even when that means risking their anger or disappointment. True love has the courage to say no when necessary, trusting that genuine connections can withstand honesty. William would have understood that. In fact, I think he knew it all along, which is why he entrusted me with his most precious legacy. Not his money or possessions, but the moral compass that would guide his son back to what truly matters. Have you ever had to take a difficult stand with someone you love? Tell me in the comments below about a time when saying no was the most loving thing you could do. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences about family forgiveness and finding your way back to what matters most. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest step is the one that leads us home.